This is The Wealth Puzzle with Michael Mansfield from the Lind Group. When a part of your financial strategy is out of tune, your long-term goals, your retirement savings, and your legacy can all suffer. With many years of experience in the financial industry, Michael provides his clients and prospects with the information they need regarding Social Security, retirement income planning, wealth management, and much more. Listen in as we address your financial concerns and provide helpful solutions to put you on the path to achieving your retirement goals. And now, here is The Wealth Puzzle with Michael Mansfield.
Howdy, everybody. Thanks for tuning in. This is Mike Mansfield at the Lind Group. Wanted to make a video this week. It was kind of interesting. I've avoided it too long. I've had too many people ask me about Trump and Trump policies and what's going on. Why is the stock market up? Nothing makes sense. And I've been avoiding it, not because I don't know what to say, because everything right now is mystery meat. That's the reality of it. And the best way to liken what's going on, in my opinion, is let's get in a time machine and go back to when Joe Biden promised to pay off everybody on Earth student loans to the tune of 1.7 trillion. And then that became quite a fiasco for 4 years. And so my struggle right now is, we know who the new president's going to be. We know how the congressional makeup is going to look. But everything is mystery meat. We don't know what's going to happen. See, the problem is Trump can say whatever he wants. He can talk about not taxing Social Security. He can talk about not taxing tips and overtime. He can talk about extending the tax cuts or making them permanent laws. He can talk about tariffs. There's so many things. Now, granted, we could talk about a lot of social things, but my focus, certainly for the content that I put out, is really economics. And so those things that I mentioned, I think, are really focused on those obvious economics. We can talk about that stuff till we're blue in the face at the moment. And guess what? It's all a useless conversation till January hits, the new Congress comes in, and we see what kind of mess we have on our hands, and if anything is actually going to get done. The control by the Republicans at the moment is razor thin in the Congress. This isn't a clean blowout where, oh my gosh, they can pass anything and do everything. It is way too tight. It is way too complicated. You've had people like Matt Gaetz leave Congress. That's not helpful to the math. Sounds like he left for maybe good reasons, but that's okay. Look at it right now. The Pete Hegseth guy, going in to one of Trump's cabinet positions is being held up by one Republican. That's because everything is razor tight. So we can talk and talk and talk and talk and talk and talk, and it's kind of useless. And I feel like I made this mistake in the past where I would jump on and make these, thought out videos talking about this or that. I know I've talked about student loans in the past. And then you find out, well, we all just kind of wasted the thought anyways. So over the next few months, as President Trump actually goes in and his new cabinet goes in and Congress gets settled and we see if all the kids can get along and they start passing laws, then what my goal will be is to really break those things down. I mean, as a point of context, there are some things that I'm really interested in. I would personally like President Trump to remove federal taxation on people receiving Social Security for a lot of reasons. Reason one, the biggest conversation, perhaps as a side note about tariffs, is the federal government used to not tax us at all. And now it's the most giantest of taxes that exists. So, hammering the retirees is kind of mean when everybody's on a fixed income. Also, to that point, when Social Security was created originally, it was created to be received as a tax-free benefit. Because when you think about it, they take the money away from you as a tax. They then pay it back to you in part. I say in part because you didn't really pay in all the money they're giving back to you. And then they tax potentially the whole thing. So it's a little confusing. It's a little slingshotty and boomerangy and weird. And I think the reality is when you look at the federal tax revenue, which is about $5 trillion, the line item of how much tax is physically collected from retirees on federal taxation of their Social Security benefits is extremely benign relative to all of the other places of taxation. So I think relative to my clients on fixed incomes, my clients in California that are suffering due to inflationary pressures and all of the other things where their Social Security doesn't keep up, I think that personally would be a huge positive. I also, and I realize this comes with a point of contention, I also think that the tax cuts that were put in place in 2017 were highly effective in generating higher tax revenue. And people say, oh, but the deficit went up. Well, you're right, it did go up. And that's because Democrats and Republicans alike are drunken sailors when it comes to spending your tax money. It is not a revenue issue, it is a spending issue. I wish people would finally understand that. We bring in the most revenue this country's ever seen. We bring in $5 trillion on average at the moment. Get in a time machine, pre-tax cuts, we were bringing in about 3.8 trillion. The number's up a lot, but the deficit keeps skyrocketing because we keep spending too much money. So I think that locking in those tax cuts, certain elements of those tax cuts would be highly effective to promoting a higher growth in the economy and GDP. So I view that as a positive. What else? I don't know. Those are kind of the obvious things that I think about with that at the moment. I like I said, to the point, once January hits and the dust starts to settle of reality, there's going to be a lot to talk about. We're going to have some pretty solid conversations to that point. Obvious current events that are very fascinating. Obviously, we're seeing a lot of headlines about Trump and Powell and the Federal Reserve and blah, 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 blah. As usual, a lot of noise, but we seem to be consumed by noise at the moment. Last week, we got our jobs number. Boom, blowout jobs number, 227,000 jobs created in November. Now, this is interesting because the Federal Reserve is in a rate cutting cycle. And, anyone who goes to their Econ 101 class says, okay, the Federal Reserve is supposed to control prices and control the labor market. That's their dual mandate of sorts. So if they're telling us inflation is gone, which they've implied, and the labor market is so robust, according to the government, then why are they still cutting interest rates? Why when the most average Fed funds rate in the history of the US was about 5%, why are we trying to very aggressively get it way below 5%? And I think that there's a tale of two cities that happens in these reports. That headline number, that 227, looks really good. You can see it on the chart. You had this nice pop. But when you read some of the subsets of the data, it's really fascinating. I know it's hard to see on here, but civilian employment, an alternative measure of jobs, including small business startups, dropped 355,000 in November, and it is down on average 60,000 a month for the last 12 months. This is a large gap. It signals that the payroll survey is probably overestimating job growth. So all these weird estimates are, they somehow magically find the way to cook the books. We went through this just a couple months ago when the Bureau of Labor Statistics came out and said, oh my gosh, in the last 12 months, somehow we've overestimated, 818,000 jobs. And so there's just a lot of mystery when you look at this. Say, oh, everything's going great. But the Fed is still cutting. So what is the Fed looking at behind the scenes and not fessing up to that makes them want to aggressively cut rates? In fact, we had this great jobs report come out, right? The headline number looks phenomenal. We're all feeling good. Life is dapper. And then you go over to the Fed watch tool that shows us the probability of a rate cut. So we have a Fed meeting next week on the 18th. I don't know. Is that next week? Yeah, it must be next week, midweek. And you can see the probability of a quarter point rate cut is 85%. But 1 week ago, the probability is only 62%. So since this data point came out, all of a sudden, everybody's like, oh my gosh, the Feds are cutting. Woohoo. So, once again, if the labor market's doing so good and inflation's under control, okay, then why is the Fed wanting to cut? It makes no sense on that level. I think a lot of it has to do with, don't show the terrible chart yet, Mike. I think a lot of it has to show the terrible number first. There it is. This is the federal government's website, the fiscaldata.treasury.gov website. Our deficit, we should have like popped champagne in those little poppers and stuff. It finally went over 36 trillion. Remember, it's not a revenue problem. It's a spending problem. Nobody wants to hear that though, because we love to spend money. You know, what's fun about our national debt? I was looking at the chart this morning. If you kind of go back, it's at that 36 trillion. You come back to like 2016, it was still 26 trillion. So, I mean, it's up a lot because of the COVID phenomenon and then the Biden spending blowout. So obviously Trump spent a lot of money via COVID. Biden then just spent a lot of money via Biden. So obviously the debt's come up a lot in totality, but it is absolutely the spending side of this. That's why it's interesting when you look at even the debate of tariffs versus, what do they call it? DOGE, the Department of Government Efficiency or something, this Elon Musk thing that they're going to do. It'll be interesting to see what they can come up with, see if we can damage control some of our spending. Because at the moment, we're still basically deficit spending $2 trillion a year. It is overwhelming. So why did I want to waste your time showing you this chart? And what I wanted to do was scroll down. Where is it? Down here somewhere. Here it is. So I talk about this a lot. And I know it's hard to see on this small chart. What this shows is the interest rate on the debt. So remember, we have tons of debt. The interest on the debt is skyrocketing. We're well over $1 trillion now. That's 20% of our annual tax revenue. So why would the Federal Reserve cut? If you cut interest rates and print money, you're going to create inflation. Well, you and I don't want inflation. We want to be able to go to a store and not throw up. But the Federal Reserve, I think, actually quietly would like a little inflation. If they can keep the federal tax base inflated, that's a positive for them because it gives them more money to keep their mess going. They really can't afford a recession or certainly deflation at the moment. If you had that tax base shrink, this would be devastating to the federal government trying to manage this mess at the moment. But on the far right of this chart, it shows that the average interest on our debt has finally grown. Last time I showed it to you is at 2.97%. It's now at 3.3%. So what happens is we owe $36 trillion. This debt has to constantly be refinanced. Something like, $5 to $8 trillion kind of every couple of years is getting refinanced. Because you have short-term bonds that are coming due. We don't have the money to pay the debt, so it gets refinanced. And so if rates are at 3% right now, if the current rate on this debt on average is 3.3%, but the Fed funds rate is close to 5%, every time that debt has to get refinanced, it's at that current rate. And this is what's pushing the interest on the debt up. So I think the Feds quietly are cutting to create inflation, so they can keep the tax base up, but also to bring down their interest rate. So as they refinance this nightmare they have on the books behind the scenes, that it doesn't, they can keep the musical chairs going that much longer. So look at that. It's already been 13 minutes. I wasn't trying to create a long video today, but somehow I accomplished it. So I really wanted to touch on the idea that I haven't forgotten about you all. I understand that there's a lot of anxiety, stress, pressure, curiosity, excitement, right? Everyone has a range of emotions on what's going on with the new presidency. I've, like I said, treaded lightly on, wasting your time talking about stuff that ends up going nowhere. In January, I think we're going to know a lot more. So in any case, this is the holidays. I hope everyone had a wonderful Thanksgiving. We're very excited for, Christmas around these parts. We are doing our toy drive. The toy drive ends on the 16th. You're probably all getting emails on it. I would encourage all of you to, if you have a chance, please bring in a toy. I think, taking an opportunity to do something for another person during the holidays is one of those basic obligations in humanity. So in any case, if you have any questions, thoughts, concerns, curiosities, please reach out to our office, 805-500-7035. Otherwise, I hope everyone has a great week, and I look forward to seeing all of you in the new year.